stance. Stance is something that's going to really help us with follow-up shots and quick shooting. Stance is also something that can give us stability, which leads to better precision accuracy. Positions such as prone or kneeling are things that can really help with this. Stance is another one of those very subjective topics, and again, it shouldn't be a one-size-fits-all for every body type and every shooter. We're going to go through some principles here that borrow from the old Weaver stance as well as the isosceles stance and kind of make a hybrid that's going to give us the best of both worlds. You can still get a lot of good work done in both these stances, but some of the issues you'll run into for things such as an isosceles stance is they're not very stable front to back. In the traditional isosceles stance, you'll see when shooters start shooting quickly or shooting a larger caliber, what will happen is their shoulders will start to push back and their toes will raise off the ground. What that does is when we're shooting quickly, the rounds will start stitching up the target. And you'll also see as we start losing our stability, we have to take a step back. With that step I just took backwards, why don't we just try to leave our foot in that position? If we draw a box around where we're standing, our left foot will be up in the top left corner of the box and our right foot will be in the bottom right corner. Obviously this is vice versa. If you're left-handed, it should be switched like this. Now this borrows a little bit from the Weaver stance. You can see that my feet aren't on the same plane, and if I were to put a stake right through my head, right through my butt, it would go straight down into the middle of my body. So my center of gravity is directly in between my legs. One of the reasons why I'm avoiding the typical Weaver stance is because this position takes a lot of force and muscle expenditure in your body to maintain your sight picture. If I were to relax my muscles, this is where my body wants to aim. So I'm constantly fighting my body to keep my sight picture where I want it to be. So with those points, let's start from the ground up. We want our feet in both opposite corners of the box, and we want our knees with a slight bend in them. If we lock both our knees out, we're not going to have that shock absorption in our muscles to fight the recoil. Once we've got both our feet in the corners of the box and a slight bend in our knees, what do we do with our back? I'll tell you what we don't want to do is to lean back. You'll see a lot of newer shooters when they're trying to obtain their sight picture, they'll push their head back, which puts a little arch in the back here, and their shoulders gets pushed back. We don't want to do that. We want to make sure our spine stays as natural as possible with a little bit of a front bend. So if I draw out, I'm just going to kind of push forward a little bit. My whole spine is still straight, but it's leaned forward into my back leg. You can see the line is created from my back leg all the way through my spine and into my neck. There's no issue with keeping that knee bent as well for mobility. And it's not that hard to fight recoil depending on what caliber you're using. Once we've got all those principles, we want to start working on getting our natural point of aim. That's where our body wants to naturally point the gun when we come out of the holster. So get in your corners of your box, a little slight bend in your knees, keep your back straight, pick a point that's directly in front of you, lined up to the sternum hopefully. Look at it, close your eyes, keeping your eyes closed, draw out and attempt to aim at that with your eyes closed. Then open your eyes and observe where your reticle is or your iron sights are in relation to where that aiming point was. Okay, I've got my aiming point. I'm going to close my eyes and draw out. If you find that you're really far to the left or really far to the right, try to make a hip adjustment or a foot adjustment until your body finds that natural point when you draw out and it's centered. A simple way to look at natural point of aim is that it's an unforced sight picture. An easy way to find your natural point of aim is to pick an aiming point on the wall, draw out and get a good sight picture, and then entirely relax your upper body. You can exhale or whatever you need to do, but just have no muscle tension at all. So, okay, so for me that dropped a very, very small amount low. So that just means I had a big breath and I just kind of pushed my shoulders down. If you have any left or right movement when that happens, that means you're using muscle tension to keep it from moving left and right. And we don't want that. We want our body to naturally align the pistol and then make micro adjustments with our grip, not the reverse. If our body position or natural point of aim is really far off from our aiming point, our instinctual shooting and point shooting can be pretty far off the mark. For instance, if I disturb my natural point of aim and then attempt to aim at that same object and relax my body, that's my full relaxation right there. That's where my body wants to go, and it's pretty well in line with the center line of my body and my hips. So what our stance can help us with is finding those sight pictures quickly and not using muscle tension to force them. I'm gonna pause this real quick because this is confusing. Natural point of aim is a different skill than pointing. Pointing is applying force to the firearm to get the sight picture that we want at various distances and heights. For instance, if I get my natural point of aim and then have to aim down at the ground, I'm not using my natural point of aim anymore. I'm now pointing from my natural point of aim. If you look down your forearm and then into your finger towards the object, you'll see how accurate your body can naturally line up your hand and finger to the object it's pointing at. We want to use as much of this ability as possible when we're forming our firearm grip and finding a firearm or grip angle that matches our natural ability to aim at an object. This is also a strange benefit of the thumb's forward support hand. When I fit my puzzle piece into the grip, I can also very accurately and naturally point my thumb at any object in my environment. And now when I slap on my firing hand, I have my firing hand thumb, my support hand thumb, and my firing hand index finger all pointing together at what I would like to shoot at. This pointability of certain firearm grips can lead to quicker rounds on target, especially when you're shooting without your sights. That's not to say you can't train around and learn where your gun wants to point, but if you can find a good relationship between the grip angle and your natural ability to point, that's going to be helpful for you. There is something to be said about keeping your wrist in line with your forearm so it's not breaking down or breaking up. You can see here that my wrist is in line with my forearm and my index finger is down the side of the barrel, which is pointing pretty well in a straight line. When I take that same wrist alignment with my forearm and apply it to a 1911 like this with a different grip angle, my finger's now pointing down and my sights are pointing down, meaning to get a sight picture from me, I need to pull my wrist up. With all that said, the grip angle itself isn't really something to worry about. Just find a gun that fits nicely in your hand, and over time your body will adjust to that grip angle and find the sights naturally. That being said, once you pick a certain grip angle, it takes a lot of suffering to pick up another gun with a different grip angle and adjust your sights accordingly. For instance, when I draw out with a gun with this grip angle, I need to actually make a conscious adjustment to bring my sights up in alignment. This adjustment to your grip angle and sight alignment over time is what causes some shooters to say that one grip angle is superior to the others. Because when you pick up another person's gun with a very different grip angle, you're going to have a hard time finding the sights. That is, however, not a gun issue, that is a me issue. That's not to say that you can't work around this. In fact, this is a very common grip angle and a lot of shooters prefer this and have been extremely successful with it. Pointing is just getting that skill set of being able to look at something and point the firearm and obtain that sight picture quickly at whatever I want to look at. Now that is a trainable skill and it's a necessary skill because we're going to be using that more often than our natural point of aim. If you think of the targets we're going to be shooting are various difficulties, various distances, various heights, we're going to have to start pointing our firearm instead of using our body to do that. Now our body still wants to help us with our shoulders and our hip position, but finding out that spatial relationship between our sights, our eyes, and where our body is extremely important. All right, back to the range. Try not to spend a disproportionate amount of time on your stance because this is really only relevant in static bullseye or precision shooting. As soon as we start moving or getting into positional shooting, our natural point of aim is affected because our hips aren't in the same position as they are in a static draw. Stance is actually largely unimportant when it comes to landing accurate rounds on target, unless you're landing accurate rounds in succession. Then a stance really helps us with that follow-up and recoil control. That's not to say that stance can't greatly assist you in obtaining that accurate shot. For instance, the prone position offers incredible stability to ensure that our sight picture isn't wavering. But at the end of the day, your sight picture and your trigger press are what makes that round hit the target. So don't spend a disproportionate amount of time thinking that your stance will fix your trigger control and your sight picture issues. If stance was essential to landing accurate rounds on target, you wouldn't be seeing competition shooters going up on one leg trying to land 2 quick shots on target before they fall off the fault line. And really, when you look at that type of ability, it's not that hard to do. Again, don't put all your eggs in the stance basket. If you're from the martial arts world, you can likely take your fighting stance and apply that directly to a shooting stance. If you look at a typical boxing stance like this, all I need to do is extend my hands out and lift my head up so I'm not tucking my chin anymore. Keep my spine neutral and bring my gun up to my eyes and not vice versa. I'm stable left and right, I'm stable front and back, and that's a decent shooting stance. You can't really apply the McDojo stances like horse stance, but if you're in a real combat martial art that actually spars and trains, you can likely just take that fighting stance and throw a gun in your hands, lift your head up a bit, and you're good to go. Let's move back a bit and we'll continue this rant. We're gonna zip back to 100 meters now. I'm gonna keep ranting while we try to smack this thing. So if you have been taught in the past that this is the only shooting stance that is acceptable, or this is the only shooting stance that is acceptable, entirely ignore these instructors. Develop a stance that works for you and can land consistent rounds on target and feels natural and relaxed. Under stress, our body does tend to lower and tense inwards, but I find if we make this our natural shooting stance, this can actually tend to get worse the more stress increases. And at some point we'll become a tactical turtle. Our body position does help us in terms of solidifying our natural point of aim and instinctual shooting at speed, but it's not the be-all end-all in terms of accuracy. If the position of our body was such a vital thing in regards to landing an accurate first round hit, then these kind of things wouldn't be possible. As much as possible, we want to attempt to keep our neck and shoulders relaxed, as this allows us to bring our gun up to our eyes instead of our gun and head to an equilibrium. When we put two things in motion at once, there becomes more variables in terms of finding that equal spot where we have our sight picture. This also allows us to have more visual field to our left and right, as opposed to our shoulders blocking this off and inhibiting our movement left and right. All right, let's get back to my mom's basement. Your real natural point of aim tends to be used in more stable and static shooting positions. For instance, in a precision rifle match or bullseye shooting match, you can really let your body sink into one static position where you can land repeatable rounds from. That's where you'll tend to find the most benefit from a natural point of aim, where you can get yourself behind cover or in a prone position or barricaded shooting position and relax completely into the position. And then if you've got everything right in your platform and your natural point of aim, your firearm will recoil back into your natural point of aim, leading to more repeatable rounds downrange. There are contexts and positions, however, that our natural point of aim and our ability to point the firearm don't really matter. Another good way to look at this is that the gun itself builds the stance, meaning that if our gun were floating in space, the only thing that would matter is that the gun is lined up to the target. All we need to do now is build our stance behind the gun and ensure that the line from the gun to the target remains during the trigger break. This is exactly the opposite philosophy from a ground up stance. We're starting from the gun and working down. This philosophy makes putting the gun in the proper position more important than your body. This is important to think about and apply in training because there's many positions in competition and real life that your body simply has to work around to get the gun in the proper position to land a shot. For instance, if we're shooting through a port or around a barricade, underneath a car, all of these positions do not care where our body is. We simply need to get the firearm in a position to land a shot and then make our body work around that. Don't forget that getting the gun into position is one of the base layers. It then comes down to our sight picture, trigger press, and grip to get the round from the gun onto the target. And that's what we're going to continue working on throughout this course.